All right, so this evening's work session is going to be about the master plan from Parks and Rec, the PROST board, and the feasibility study for the rec center. And Billy Cooksey is going to present on this. If everybody could go around and just state your name, just so everybody knows who's talking and what's going on. We'll start with you, Billy.
Yeah, Billy Cooksey, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Perfect.
Laurelyn Bachman, on the PROST board.
John Evans, I'm on the PROST board.
Sarah Brown. I know it says Braun, but it's actually pronounced Brown, in case anyone was curious. Also on the PROST board.
Jesse Roper, also on the PROST board.
I've been calling you Braun for years. I am so sorry.
Not a big deal. Everybody does it.
It's a work session.
It's okay. It's okay.
Good.
I'm loosening things up.
Thank you for clearing that up for me. I'll get it again in trustee.
Taylor Shosey, Mayor.
Brian Mason, Mayor Pro Tem.
Rebecca Daly, trustee.
Patty Garcia, Town Administrator.
And Jason Gank with Barry Dunn.
Perfect.
Excellent. Well, good evening, Mayor, trustees, and PROST board. Thank you for joining us here this evening. As I said, I'm Billy Cooksey, Director of Parks and Recreation. I'd just like to begin our work session tonight to thank the Board of Trustees for the continued backing and leadership in moving forward with this crucial planning effort. The town's PROST Master Plan and Community Center Feasibility Study. Your support has made it possible for us to take a comprehensive look forward, an approach to our parks, recreation, open spaces, and trails here in Wellington. I also want to extend my sincere appreciation to our PROST Advisory Board. Your engagement, thoughtful input, and steady commitment over the years laid the foundation for this work to be done and all the work that we're doing today and previously. This process that we're doing builds on the dedication that you have for the town and keeps us moving in a unified direction. So thank you for all of your effort. And most importantly, I really want to thank the community throughout this process. The master plan is truly a community-driven plan and process. During the engagement phase, we had more than 60,000 touch points with residents, stakeholders, and user groups. That level of participation speaks volumes about how much Wellington values its parks, trails, open spaces, and recreational opportunities. The vision that we'll get that emerge from this process will be shaped directly by our community. I'd also like to recognize our consulting partners that are here tonight. Jason Gank with Barry Dunn and Mary Schambach and Kevin Armstrong with BRS. Thank you for guiding us through this in all of the thoughtful data and informed process and helping us translate what the community's feedback is into actionable and implementable strategies. Thank you. So this work strongly aligns with the town's comprehensive plan, specifically goals 3 to enhance, maintain, and increase recreational spaces, natural amenities, so that they can be enjoyed by all ages and abilities, as well as policies 3.1 and 3.6, which lead to updating the 2015 Parks and Trails Master Plan, which we are currently doing with this PROST Master Plan, as well as assessing the need and timing for a recreational facility that can expand opportunities for recreation. Tonight's visioning session represents a key step in advancing those commitments that we've made to our town. This joint work session with the Board of Trustees and our PROST Advisory Board focuses on the visioning phase of the PROST Master Plan and Community Center Feasibility Study. As we gather this evening, we are at the foundational step in the process, one where we refine priorities, confirm community values, and establish an understanding of Wellington's aspirations and desired outcomes for parks, recreation, trails, open spaces, and the potential for a community center and the amenities that it would include. The outcome of this phase will help define what success looks like for our PROST system over the next 10 to 15 years, which is very important and will directly inform policy, facility planning, service levels, and capital investment strategies. Jason Gank, our project lead from Barry Dunn, will facilitate the discussion around key themes that have emerged from robust community engagement over the past 8 months, demographic and market analysis and assessments of our existing systems. These conversations will explore community values, recreational trends, equity and accessibility considerations, desired levels of service, and a role for the future community center could play in supporting wellness, social connection, and overall quality of life in Wellington. And I think that's why we're all here. That last statement is really the most important to myself as the Parks and Recreation Director, is just promoting health and wellness and positive community life in Wellington. The visioning work session that we're headed into right now is designed to be collaborative and explorative, providing trustees and PROST board members an opportunity to share input, ask questions, and align around a clear and cohesive vision before we move into alternative developments, cost analysis, and implementation planning. The feedback gathered tonight will directly shape the draft version of what the PROST master plan will be, which will be brought back to the Board of Trustees and the PROST board sometime in the near future, hopefully late spring or early summer. And this visioning session tonight will inform the goals and guiding principles that carry forward into the PROST master plan and the final of the community center feasibility study. So very important what we're doing here tonight, and I really appreciate everybody here. Critically important, not just because it guides amenities and the infrastructure, but it influences the long-term financial stability of our department in Parks and Recreation and contributes to the broader health of our community. Strategic investment in parks, trails, and recreation supports economic vitality, enhances public safety, improves physical and mental health, and creates gathering spaces and strengthens social connections, and ensures we are responsibly upgrading and maintaining infrastructure that we already have. It also ensures we are planning deliberately rather than simply reacting to the growth. Finally, I just want to emphasize that the community center feasibility is just one component to the overall master plan. It's an important conversation that we have, but it sits within a larger integrative vision for parks, recreation, open spaces, and trails across the entire community. So again, thank you all for being here and your commitment to Wellington's future and for your willingness to engage in meaningful dialogue tonight. So I look forward to productive and inspiring discussion. With that,
Thank you.
sitting there waiting,
What a great way to set the foundation.
we'll leave it to
You
you.
took a lot of my thunder, so the presentation just went to 2 minutes. I'm just kidding. I did receive Billy's permission to just emphasize that, there's a number of slides, and if at any time you'd like me to stop, and if you have a question, just let me know. And this is really intended to be that style of a session, and I really appreciate the layout and the work session style of the joint opportunity here this evening. So thank you for that. I will have, there's already set, and you may have seen this already in the slide deck because I believe it's been public, 3 specific spots also to pause and reflect and to get any input you might have. So emphasizing again, just one thing from Billy, we're not done. Just to be clear, we're not here saying, here is the findings. In fact, I've seen some of you a couple of times, and at the onset of this planning process, we said we'd come back to you when we had the data. We'd come back to you when we heard from the community. That's what this is. So from here, getting some feedback, getting some questions, we'll take those additional steps, as Billy said. Thank you for all the volunteering you do for the community. I'm not just saying this, and I checked in with the rest of the consult team before this evening. Wellington is a special place. Staff, as an example, always cross-department opportunities with this effort, never taking themselves too seriously, but definitely taking their job and their service for the community very seriously. So at every step of the way, Billy and team were pushing back saying, have we thought this through? Have we done enough work in this area? And so some of the things you're hearing tonight are additional steps in research we've conducted. So just want to give kudos. Also, the community, as Billy said already, we had no problem talking to the community. I mean, everyone had something to say. And thank you for letting us do the Blues Brothers idea.
Yeah, no.
Not every community is open to that, and stuff like that. But that creativity, it just sometimes you just got to ask people a different way to be aware of what's happening. So thank you for all of that. It's been awesome. So I'll go ahead and get started.
I was just gonna say thank you for all your work. We partnered with someone who truly cares about helping us advance our community. And I can't say thank you enough to you and your team, not just through the engagement phase, because that was a huge portion, and there was a lot of work that was heavy lifting up front. But everything that we're doing now with all the data and what comes next. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
One of my favorite things, Lakita, one of our colleagues at Very Dunn says, I was a director in the 1900s. And I'm like, really? That funny, but yeah, I was. So I guess it's 32 years of service, 27 years as a practitioner, 5 as a consultant. And yeah, I do this because it's awesome. And I get to learn from you guys and help communities. So thank you, Billy. That's very nice. And a reminder, just literally at any time, say, oh, Jason, slow down. Okay, but general overview of what we're trying to accomplish tonight. And certainly one of the first areas we're going to talk about is engagement, because the majority of the time when we have these types of sessions, one of the priorities certainly is to hear, well, what does the community really say about the future? And we want to hear more about that. So let me get right into that, if I could. And these are really a high level summary. This information you're seeing tonight is supported by pages and pages of analysis. We'll have all that. The town will have all that at the completion of this process. But we also wanted to make this, Barry Dunn doing the heavy lifting of really identifying the themes from everywhere. So when you look at this, and it was really hard to see, although you may have seen this slide before, it's emphasizing that we try hard to get to all pockets, all areas of your community. It's not just online. It's not just Siskiyou Valley. It's not just, hey, let's expect the public to come to us. It's we go to them. And so we worked very hard, and Billy, definitely stole, as you should, as a director, stole some of the numbers of the touch points, which I'm really proud of, which never would have been possible without your staff working so hard to get to the people too. I was just telling Billy, I would do anything right now if I can go outside and have it look like that in shorts and green, trees. But hey, what beautiful memories we have. And there's the Blues Brothers right there in your community. We had a lot of fun. And again, with your staff, had a lot of fun too. But again, as I said, we did our best to go to the people and provide various facets for people to share their input. And there you have it. Billy kind of tickled us earlier, kind of at the high level, which was awesome, but at just over 60,000 touch points. And of course, that we track that in a similar way across the nation for all the projects we do. But that gives us an idea of generally, could a community member be aware that this is underway? Now, did they all sign up to take the survey? No. But did they all sign up to go to a pop-up or go to, or stop by? Not necessarily, but those touch points typically indicate how many times a community, which is way bigger population, but individuals in your community were given an impression, if you will, an idea that, oh, wow, the town's working on parks and recs. I better, see if I'm interested in that, give some inputs. That's pretty cool. And this is particularly hard to read. So I'm going to read some of this off. These are just some general themes on, and we have a couple different ways of saying the voices of Wellington, but to just give you some general themes. Department strengths are well supported by the community, dedicated staff, inclusive events, accessible spaces. Areas for improvement might be improved facilities, new programs, new sports and fitness specifically, and better maintenance. Also below, some of the top areas of most interest to the community, things like swimming pools, recreation centers, community centers, basketball courts, shade and gathering spaces, youth and adult sports, playground and park features, events and cultural activities, and other park amenities of interest to the community. On here, what you're seeing here is one of the findings from the Siskiyou Valley survey. And what we look at is, and this one in particular is about facilities, and the next one's about programs. But this is where kind of the meeting of both, hey, I'm interested in that type of thing, but also my needs are unmet as a family, as a household. So we tend to look at the areas in red as an example of another area of high praise. And again, this graph and the next one specifically is from Siskiyou Valley survey. Okay, whereas I'm trying to give you kind of a lot of information, hopefully in a succinct manner. So things like indoor pools again are coming up, multi-use hiking, biking, and walking trails, active adult center, indoor basketball, open space conservation areas, those types of things from facilities in this Siskiyou Valley survey. From a programming standpoint, let's see, I apologize. Here we go. Sorry about that. Adult fitness and wellness programs, water fitness, swim lessons, outdoor environmental and culture programs, special events. Those types of things and a host of others definitely come out as priorities in the Siskiyou Valley survey. So this is in fact one of those areas that I wanted to, take a pause. And don't worry, if you can't think of everything right now, there'll be 2 more times where I pause and just say, I just gave you a lot of information and there's still even a lot more behind the scenes that kind of brings those themes out. But I'm curious, as a joint leadership group, what are some of the things you heard or you'd like to comment on at this point related to engagement? But, because the next pause will be mostly about the general analysis of the planning effort and the outcomes you receive. But about engagement or anything that's on your mind, I would love to hear from you.
I mean, I think we always, kind of funny when we looked at these and talked through the engagement piece, of course, we're all drawn to that, the community survey piece with the 312. And I think the important thing, like you said, is to remember that that's all statistically valid, that while that number may have been lower, that it was enough to reach that statistically valid point. And we also talked about how important that being in front of our community and those personal engagements with people are really where you get the most feedback. And I know for myself, being around and talking to people, even just handing out cards, 4th of July or, Brewfest, that there were lots of people that we talked to that I don't know that they necessarily ended up taking the survey, but them having faces and people that they can approach and talk to about those moments are really important. And I think it shows them that we truly are interested in hearing what they have to say. It's not just about us doing this because we feel like it's important. It's about knowing that we're hearing their feedback and taking that into account. The piece on the slide where we talk, so there's top priorities, and it's the first slide with the high priority list that you see on that second line, that the multi-use hiking, biking, and walking trails is a huge priority. For the PROST team, this is super important because this was a huge point and a desire in the 2015. So we're talking an 11-year span where we're still seeing this as a really high priority. And that I could bring this up later, but I'm going to do it now while we're looking in that specifically. I've been in Wellington since 2012. My husband and I originally moved in on the east side of the highway. And we lived there from 2012 to 2019. And then we moved over into Sage Meadows when they first started building. And when we moved, all of our neighbors were like, "Oh, fine, you're going to the cool side." Because there is this, and I think it's still valid today. There is this division, we have it. We have the physical barrier of I-25, and that we recognize that that separation really keeps us from being able to equally support our community. And when we talk about all the things that are happening now with our downtown and creating this center hub, to me, we're going to have a beautiful center hub. Do we have a way to get people here? Do we have a way? And by creating that opportunity to keep people in our town, we're creating that economic spark. If we want people to spend their money here and we want these new things and we want viable businesses, then we have to create a way for people to get there. And it's not just our own community. We talk to people all the time. We're like, man, I really wish I could bike on the trails from Fort Collins up to Wellington. Laurelyn has a group of people that come into Owl Canyon that bike. OCB gets people on the patio that bike. And they don't necessarily want to do highway. I mean, some of the big time bikers could care less about Highway 1 and all the grasshoppers. But when we talk about families and that connectedness, trust me, I've biked it. The grasshoppers are insane. That's such an important piece. And we hear it from ourselves. We know that that's a need for us. I'd love to be able to get my family from Sage Meadows downtown. And that's a community on this side of the highway. So for me, that's a hot spot. That's something I'm passionate about. I know that there are other people are passionate about, and we're seeing it here. So I think that's just something that it's really important to draw that conversation to. And I'd love to hear other thoughts, or if that sparked anything for all of you when you were looking at that.
I think one thing that doesn't get highlighted enough about these types of studies or feedback is what Parks and Rec or trails does to the economy. When people are saying that their services aren't being met, if that's important to them, common sense says that they're going somewhere else to receive those services, which means they're taking their families, which means if it's a Saturday, they're eating out, which means if it's a Tuesday night on a soccer practice, they're eating out because by the time they get back, they don't have time. And that's a lot of people, as we've seen in the study so far, that are leaving our community because their parks and recreation needs aren't being met. I mean, of course, some of them are, right? We know we're doing well in some of these categories, but we're not capturing everybody that we possibly could in the totality of what we found in this study, what everybody's needs are. So I think that's a really important part, and it's really hard because there's not great metrics for a parks department to say like, we lost X amount of dollars because we did not have soccer on a Tuesday when in Fort Collins. It's really, really hard unless we do some heat mapping, you know, and we get a company to come in and see where the cars are coming in and out, which we've talked about as a town to try to do more stuff like that. But we can see through this study that people's needs aren't being met. So foundationally, we are losing our local economy going somewhere else. And I think that's just a pretty big idea with this that doesn't come with the normal thought of building a trail or building a new soccer field or a baseball complex. And I'm just throwing stuff out there as theoretical, but like when we invest into our community and what they need to stay here, we invest in a larger sense than just the actual physical asset that we're putting in.
I think for me, it also comes down to the connectedness. You know, Wellington is a small community, but we spend a lot of time on social media and we spend a lot of time not being connected with one another. And when we have opportunities to mingle and be together, and whether it's events or whether it's adult classes, you know, versus just being so heavy on youth sports, we're spending that time face to face with our community members, and that leads to a bigger sense of connectedness. And so you can think of your trails as all those arteries leading into your heart. You know, I love this community. I think it has a ton of potential, and I think a lot of people feel that way, and they want to feel that, they want to see that, and this is our opportunity to put all of it together and connect it.
I did want to kind of jump real quick. Is that right? On the trails part, I know some of you guys have been around for a while, and we worked really hard on these trails for a while, trying to get the connectivity between Washington and Jefferson done. And then we hit a wall, and it was like it kind of came off the table. We just didn't have an avenue to get there. But I think the trails, again, is a huge portion of how to get people to, or what we do have. Because like it was said, the east side is just kind of missing amenities. They don't have basketball courts, they don't have certain things. But if we could get them access to this side a little bit easier instead of just the one underpass, those amenities become available. And that's stuff we do have, and then we can focus on what we don't have. And then again, making that accessible to everybody. So, and the only other thing I want to talk about this one is that a lot of the things that are on our priority list here are things that have been brought to us by the community before, that has been brought to our meetings. And we had a huge list of our wish list, and it was on a big sheet, and we sat and did a whole work session over our wish list, and a lot of it shows up again. And that's exciting to me because that means that the community in a whole, not just the few people that came to our meetings, is echoing the same desire here. And this is something that we move forward with later, and we say these are the things the community wants. And I'm really excited to see how it's echoed here, because this is all stuff we've worked on, we've tried, we've put it on our list. So I'm really excited for this plan.
I think one thing that's super important to touch on too is a community that invests in itself attracts investment, right? So we've heard from that from the birthday, when we were talking about that. And so we need to do this for our community, and we need to take pride in our community and give them the amenities that they're asking for, right? Figuring out how to do that, you know, we'll figure that out, but we need to get it done. And that will attract more businesses, more revenue, just like Billy was touching on. You know, they're going to be eating out, they're going to, whatever the case may be, they are going other places. There's been multiple times where with my friends that they're renting birthday places for their kids. We have to go to like Eaton's Rec Center or the leapers, fully booked, so we have to just have it at the farm or whatever the case may be. And so it's not as, this community is hard to have those events for kids' birthdays, parties, and get large get-togethers. And so the gathering spaces is huge. Trails, yeah, 100%. I have people that I know live on the east side, and they reach out to me frequently about how they can't get through on that trail because it's flooded or whatever the case may be. And so we've talked about maybe that multimodal setup at some point with CDOT, maybe getting some, collaboration there. But yeah, I mean, I like seeing all of this, and then yeah, the point on the trails, 2015 to now, it's still a high priority. And I think it's important to have an act or to promote activity within your community so people stay active, right? That's going to help with mental health. That's their overall health, just everything. And so, yeah, I really like what we're seeing here, and this, 60,000 plus touch points, and then the people that actually took the survey and getting real feedback from our residents on what they want. This isn't me up here saying this is what I want. This is the town people, the residents saying it. So that's all I have to say on it.
A lot of, speaking of a wish list of priority projects that PROST has been looking at. When we went and looked through this from the perspective of PROST, they weren't surprised by anything that showed up, meaning that they have been, in my mind, accurately presenting the town of Wellington from a resident perspective and from volunteers. They've been pushing the projects that, ta-da, oh my gosh, everybody actually wants. So like, I want to acknowledge that for one thing, that you guys have been on point this entire time, and that you're doing great work in pushing these projects that are important. This is giving you even more validation in my mind of exactly the work that you're doing. So thank you. The other point I wanted to bring up is that a conversation that we had with PROST too was a lot of things in the high priority sections are amenities that are completely absent from our community, maybe, or like we know or missing in a sense. So obviously there's a high priority for it, right? I want to, and people want it. It's not here and they want it. But I want to note something too, is on the programs and activities. One thing that Wellington rocks is events. So I'm not going to say that we don't have events, but even though we already have events and a culture of events and people love coming to them, we have great attendance. People are saying we need to invest more in events. So I think that is wild. So I want to acknowledge that is a very different consideration than the things that are completely absent in the community that people want. Now, events we already have. And for other things, people want swimming lessons. Obviously, that means a pool. People want to play pickleball. Therefore, they need more courts or dedicated courts. Those things have like really obvious trade-offs, right? But when someone's like, you guys need to invest in events, what does that mean exactly? Like how do you bring that to fruition? And so we talked about that this morning at Main Street. And so when someone says, you guys need to make investments in programming, investments in events, the structure of facility that's associated with that people didn't necessarily put on the list, but I need to acknowledge that. That is a stage. That is permanent bathrooms. That is electricity hookups for bands. That is, so we have to think about these physical facility improvements associated with those things. The other ones are really easy handoff options, like you need a pool to swim. So I want to bring that up too, because that's not so obvious from here. And I think we might be missing the amphitheater, the band shell, like those kind of things where somebody could just walk up with a guitar and create an event, right? Just by having the facility available and ready for them. So I needed to bring that up today because it's not obvious when you look at this. Like if you were to say facility 1 through 10 and prioritize them, I don't think the amphitheater is on the list right now from how we're looking at it. And so I'm worried that that's missing. The other thing I wanted to bring up is and this is coming from the way I sound when I say this sounds horrible, but everybody I know, all of their kids have all taken swim lessons. That's an entitlement. I have this bias and I'm acknowledging right now that that's not the case for all people. But of all my friends and all of our kids together, they have all taken swimming lessons, 100% of them. And not just once. Like 4 years, 3 classes each of swimming lessons. Meaning that we went to Fort Collins facilities to do that on a per week, multi times a year, multi-year for each kid. And that's how many times I went to those cities, and then we went out to eat, and then we went grocery shopping, and then we made friends in those classes, and then we got together with those friends at the Aslan Center. Like, it created a culture of a community of things that, in my mind, every kid who's had that, afforded that, has gotten to do. So a pool is not, I think a pool is, well, it's a life safety thing. Kids should know how to swim, but I think it's more of an essential than a lot of people say. Like, it's a nice to have or whatever, but it's a safety thing, and then all kids should know how to swim. That's just how it should be. So I wanted to bring that up here. But that was it, the 2 things, the events and swimming lessons.
I think touching on the events piece too, we've heard the feedback from the community. I think this is, just because we're saying like, hey, this is a huge priority, I want to go back and touch on the trail thing, doesn't mean that those steps haven't been taken. Like, it's improved. If we looked at what the trails looked like in 2015 to what they look like now, there's been huge improvement.
Right.
So it's not to take away from what's already been done.
Right.
But the same thing with events and this has grown a little more in the past couple of years, but we're heavy on alcohol events. Like, let's just be honest. When we talk about what events we have that pull our community in, they're very adult focused. And so I think when people talk about wanting events, it's wanting opportunities to do things as a family. I mean, look at what 4th of July looked like last year downtown with all the music. I mean, there were people everywhere, kids and families. And so when we talk about an event space and an outdoor space, I think the stage and all of the pieces that go into that are really important, but it's also about what can we use that space for more than just an alcohol, serving location for the different events that happen. And so I think that that's something that is really important for our community. I mean, Jesse and I have kids around the same age, and there are times where I'm like, okay, well, into Fort Collins we go, that, they can only play at the same park so many times, or they can only, bike so many laps around the neighborhood before, that's all they can do. And so, but it's not just that. I mean, we hear all the time from people, what can the teenagers do in Wellington?
Right.
What is there for the teenagers to do? And so all of this, when we look at all of this, it needs to be multi-generational. It's not just about one community or one niche that we're supporting. It's about how do we create a community for all.
Ms. Brown, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. And quite frankly, I got to say thanks to, all the PROST team as far as this goes. You guys have had some really incredible, just creative ideas over the last, couple of years as far as movies in the park and that sort of thing, to be able to get the youth out into the community. I think you're absolutely correct when we are a little weighted towards adult oriented events. So obviously having that creativity out there is excellent. But as far as the data that we've got here, none of this is any surprise to me. I mean, I constantly hear pools, meeting spaces, pickleball. I can't tell you how many folks we've had come in front of the board saying we need pickleball courts, and I know Mr. Cooksey knows that. So, but I also do want to highlight that to your point about future planning. A lot of what we've done, even as a board over the last couple of years, and trying to get the cooperative planning area going between us and Larimer County, and being able to hopefully get some trails connected between us and Fort Collins. I think a lot of that's going to end up coming to fruition in the next maybe year, maybe 2 or so. So, but you're exactly correct, right? We need to be planning for the future and not just, tomorrow. So, but you guys have hit the nail on the head on a lot of this stuff. I mean, economic vibrancy to bring the culture back to Wellington and these types of things. Obviously, recreation is how you do that and get people together. So I think you guys are right on track.
I think my little touch with the events is I kind of look at it a little bit different, is that it's maybe not necessarily like investing more in the events we do. It's just people have such a good time at the events we do now. And I'd like to see more of that. And I think that's the way I read that number, is not necessarily that we're doing anything wrong at the events we have. We just need more of them because people want the opportunity to get out and do stuff. So I see it more as, can we find other times to get out and do more and not just focus on what we've always done? And I think we started doing that already with St. Patty's Day and, different things that have come up a long time, but just finding the opportunity to get people out of the house and engage more. So that's the way I read that number, just my piece.
You bet. I do just want to add one thing, because I think there's been an awful lot of talk lately about listening to the residents and that sort of thing. This is 100% representative of listening to the residents, right? We've got these surveys out here. People are telling us this is what it is we want. And I think it's very important that we consider these things, down the road. Obviously, how we financially bring some of these to fruition. Obviously, this is a visioning session, right? So for us to all kind of come together and talk about, what the ideas are and how we maybe get there. The financial stuff will come down the way, and I'm not worried about that. So we'll, but it's important that we are listening, and I think everybody, should be aware of that. So
I would say that, roads don't build communities. Infrastructure doesn't build communities. Public utilities don't build communities. Parks, recreation, open space, trails, those events that bring people together. That's what communities is. And quite frankly, in my opinion, that's one of the primary purposes of local government, is to provide those opportunities for personal growth, personal enrichment within the community. And in fact, and I agree with what Ryan just said, the fact that we've got a survey with 61,000 touch points, we're listening to the community and communities. For me, I'm not here to dispute any information. I'm here to listen to this information and learn from it, and to get an idea of what the community is actually looking for. I know that about 30% of our population is age 18 and below, and I often worry that we're not providing enough of that community service to that demographic.
Yeah. Well, we're not. I mean, we see the
We're
trouble
not.
they get into over the summer. Right? Nothing better to do.
Information being links lately, but I like the study. I like what we've covered so far. I like the approach. I've been working a lot of communities, and having that master plan, I was a big supporter of getting this master plan funded and getting this underway, because this is our way of knowing the board of trustees and even the community's way of really justifying and certifying. This is what the community wants. And it gives the board of trustees direction, to create policy, to create budget priorities to make these amenities happen. So, I'm excited about this.
Yeah. Well,
I was just gonna piggyback real quick. I just want to reiterate kind of what Jason said. There's a lot more behind all of this data too that everybody will see. It's just when we're here right now, we've got to pull out the key pieces and the overarching findings of what everything is. But there's a lot to bring in it. It hits home, to push all these ideas out there that community has a lot of different needs and desires that aren't being met. And here's the theme. So
yeah, what I was going to touch on is tying back to Brian of the interconnectivity of us to like maybe Fort Collins with trails and things of that nature. I mean, to really capitalize on that, so it's not just another feeder back into Fort Collins, is we need to have attractions and things here. So people from Fort Collins are like, let's go out there on the trail and go attend, this concert or whatever the case may be. Right. So we got to be really forward thinking in that aspect to capture that before it does become connected, or we're going to lose even more. Right. So we got to really be on top of it there.
Guys, your feedback has been awesome. And if you didn't know, I was recording a lot of the feedback. And what I'd like to do is, because we've definitely touched on some of the quantitative sort of the analysis pieces of and I have some more of that coming up that I'd like to share with you. But I wanted to mention a couple things that might bring out some other ideas. This might seem a bit daunting to say, well, there's no way we can do all these things. And I hear that in other communities, or where do we start? And that's why tonight's a good touch point, to say, okay, what are the highest priorities? And what it also doesn't say here is, because we're not there yet, who provides these services? No one is expecting, the town to literally create a grocery list, say when. It's more about what are the most, core things that your community and organization has said? Maybe it's, and I heard it over here, the infrastructure around events. Doesn't mean Wellington provides more events themselves. Maybe, by the way, I'm not, this isn't any finding recommendation. I'm just saying, I've even seen communities that while they're building their facilities or not building them at all, the swim lesson component. There's communities that provide free fourth grade swim lessons at the school site, meaning they shuttle from the school site, from the school day. Sorry if there's any school folks in the room, you probably want to throw me out the room right now because you guys got a lot of priorities, Sony, but I've seen communities do that. Fourth grader, it's important. Everyone needs to learn how to swim. They work with the schools. They bus them to the nearby aquatic facility. It might be Timnath soon. It might be Fort, I don't know, wherever that is, Windsor, and you provide that while, Billy and team figure out, 15-year vision solutions. So I love this. And some of the things you mentioned, and it's really important, all of this is important, but like the more, even more tangible things, like how do we get there and the amenities that it would take, we're going to get through that. We're going to get through that when we get to, great, what are the best actions we can take? And I promise you, after visioning, those will be flexible, because think of this as, and it was great to hear that a lot of this resembles the work that you've already been doing and things you've already heard. Now you take this in a way to a granting organization, to a partner, and say, not only did we think we need that, but look at all the touch points we had. Look at all the analysis that was done and how Billy and team would now compete against the next city or town and applying for a grant. They're going to compete higher. It's just other stuff to think about. But I'm going to continue, if that's okay, and pause again. But a reminder, you can tell me to pause at any time as I go through.
Can I be a
Oh,
pain?
please.
I just have one more thing to add that,
Yep.
that we talked about in with the chart too, of like high priority, low priority, was Rebecca kind of touched on this, that some of those low priorities are probably because we already offer those things. But as we maybe complete or close the loop on some of those higher priorities, some of those lower priorities might circle back around in 5 to 10 years that might change as things shuffle. And so that was something that came up when we met as a PROST group over it that I thought was really important to share as well.
Awesome. Well said. Thank you so much. And we did throw a slide in here from the consulting team, kind of what did we hear? So we first wanted to ask what your overall kind of impressions were, and we did that. I did that intentionally because I didn't want to just jump, and this is not anything like we think as a consulting team, you should do this or you should do that. This is just simply as a consulting team looking at the comprehensive engagement findings, only based on engagement. What do we believe your priorities to be? Engagement can't stand alone. Fiscal has to come into play. Analysis needs to come into play. But if you look at it, it's here, and it probably is no surprise because you've heard. But in the high priority, what we believe we heard as the highest priority for the community centers. Those are not in order, by the way. It's not like but the high priority sort of tier would be community center, swimming pool, sports, multi-purpose spaces, basketball courts, pickleball, park safety improvements, special events and trails. Medium, access to nature, shade, permanent restrooms. That's funny. Restrooms, park accessibility, playground splash pads, and so forth and so on. I won't read it all to you, but by the way, and based on what you just said too, Sarah, right? Mm-hmm. It's important. A couple of things. If that made the list, even at the low priority, it's still something that a good portion of some of your community talked about. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I haven't said yet that is really, really important, in my opinion, and having done so many of these efforts and seen success of them from leadership on your teams, it's equally important to see what's in here as it is to see what's not in there. And that doesn't mean we don't pick and choose things that aren't on this list eventually, but you may decide differently about how you deliver those services because you have limited funding, but just something else to think about. So going into the analysis, which by the way, that is one of my favorite pictures ever. Who got the fish literally flying out while Billy and who is like monitoring to make sure all the fish are counted. Who is that with you?
Jim Miller.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
A little more.
Yeah, so that was a beautiful photo.
Right after that dock was finished. Yep.
Kind of a position statement here, and this isn't at all to be like summarizing the entire plan, but a couple of key words in our sort of overall position statement. We look at analysis is to say that you're well positioned with a strong foundation, yet based on the analysis and the feedback, there's room to grow, and that the distribution of services, like I think it was talked about, the experience, someone talked about relocating, right? Someone talked, yeah, and how that changed your access to services. Very real, and we heard about that. So you guys are doing a great job, yet there's definitely room for improvement. It's just a matter of what choices you make in what order and what opportunities are presented, of course, to get there. What, like, let me give you one real quick, interesting one you're gonna see is in level of service. You know, you have these great spaces and people are adapting their spaces. I think someone said this earlier, for programs and activities, right? And people creating their own events and doing activities, but in some cases, they're using parks that maybe weren't designed to be used that way. And by the way, that's not a bad thing. But so what does that mean for your overall provision of services? What amenities really should be there? What amenities no longer even really being used? So it's just very interesting how your community is actually using those spaces. It's not enough to say, great, there is a space. It's also say, what are they doing there? You know, and Billy, I remember a recent example, we were just talking about this. One of your parks, or one of your sites, and it was also a group that, I want to say it was a rally, I could be wrong, that was requesting a site, and they just were wanting to move the site, but from a location amenity standpoint, I don't remember the exact event, but things like that are happening, you know, in your community. So awesome spaces, but the way that they're being used really deserves some conversation. And I don't mean that's bad. I don't. I mean, what more can we do potentially to support and facilitate those things? So here we're talking about programs specifically. And I won't read all this, but it's here, but there's a lot of information on a programming plan that we created for you, based on leadership from staff and input from the community and all types of different ways that we do that. But I'll just read the barriers as an example. Cost and access to facilities is a barrier here in Wellington. The location, again, and the distribution of where those services are happening in Wellington is a barrier. Timing and scheduling. By the way, we hear that everywhere, but nonetheless, we need to listen to that. It is true. And then facility gaps, just where people are going to do their activities. And we talk about survey findings. We also talk about heat map findings to help better explain what some of those barriers and opportunities might be. At a high level, and believe there's a lot of information in the program, so I'm really simplifying this kind of thing. But our key findings when we assess your programs, by the way, congrats on the rec guide, right? The one that's
That's all.
We recommend things like this, based on everything we've analyzed, your aquatics portfolio. And I gave you an example where another city was running swim lessons and busing people and children there and not even having a pool. Expanding early childhood and non-sport programs, strength and adult fitness and so forth and so on down that list. But those are some of the most highest prioritized from your community, from your engagement findings, and our overall analysis of your distribution of your programs and services. There's a lot of words here. Don't worry about it. This is sort of an overall summary of things you already know. How many acres do you have? How many parks do you have? What are the categories? It's just restating sort of, you're doing a great job. And I think the bottom one says this here, but you are underperforming in some standards, keeping up in fragmented ways, but doing it again, as hard as working as hard as you can, especially with the rapid growth that's happening in the region. An inventory of your sites is right there, probably no surprise. We talk about the types of parks you have. And again, what I said earlier matters too, from even though we generally classify these by acreage and what amenities are offered at that park, some of your parks are functioning in multiple classifications, which is fine, which is great. And actually that's awesome because your community is really making different use of them. And from a service level standpoint, we work hand in hand with agencies across the country to do an assessment of your amenities. So we actually go boots on the ground with folks that are evaluating hundreds of systems in the United States. And just to be clear, Barry Dunn doesn't just say, this is what you're doing great, this is what you're doing bad. We will never do that. We work hand in hand with your staff. What's right for Wellington? We don't just say, oh yeah, you compare to Denver or whatever, no, we work hand in hand with staff to develop these findings. So I think the process is fair, and it's based on a lot of experience, but it shows here as far as how many amenities exist. And amenities could be, we have 80 some different components that we look at in those categories. Could be a bench, could be a shelter, could be a basketball court, could be a whole host of things, but we do an amenity count. We talk about what condition, generally speaking, those are in. From a parks, trails, and facility service levels, we helped identify priority areas in your community. This doesn't mean that all the other areas aren't important. You know, they are. But if we were to say, you know, like focus area, someone mentioned the downtown corridor earlier, I think, you know, that might be a focus area. But here we talk about northeast of Jefferson Ave and Frontage Road, where about 170 residents lack pedestrian access. We talk about areas 2 and 3, less densely developed areas with town boundaries, approximately 28 residents where land has not been converted into residential housing type area. Other areas, southeast East County Road 66 and North County Road 9. And I won't read again all of that, but we're trying to illustrate that on the map as far as some areas that, you know, if you were to say, hey, I want to focus on those areas, or if you happen to be pursuing a grant or something like that, or a partner adjacent to those areas, might be good to come back and say, look what we've identified through planning. That's a gap area. We also take it a step further and we highlight target areas directly in Wellington in the areas of trails and facilities as an example. So what we've done there, and this is really simplifying it, but we've identified corridors. We're not identifying people's property, just to be clear. No one wants that. But opportunity, and it was kind of said earlier, how do we connect to Fort Collins? How do we connect it to, you know, all these other areas? And so we're helping identify, well, if you were to look at the gaps in ways you're connecting your community, there they are. So things like integrate mobility and connectivity planning throughout the town. And by the way, the transportation plan and the cross-department efforts absolutely are being considered and linked into what this effort, we always do that to make sure we're doing cohesive planning. Extending the north-south trail between Wellington Community Park and Harvest Park are just 2 examples of helping to address gaps in connectivity. So what you're seeing here is very specific to connectivity gaps. Those circles that you're seeing are the actual gaps. And it's completely not intended to highlight anyone's property, just to be real clear, rather the corridors. So just again, high level key findings for facilities and trails. Overall, great performance, strong performance with limited excellence, meaning you have a lot of great things you're doing really well. But when you say, what is your most marquee thing, your best thing you're doing? That's kind of a lot of everything, right? So that's fine. And you're doing a lot of good stuff. Emerging trail network, but you do have connectivity gaps. I'll just say this, you know, communities would never be strong in trails if they don't start somewhere. Like you can't overnight handle all those corridors. And of course not, Jason. But if you don't have those identified, when those opportunities are presented from developers, from your regional transportation plan, then it'll never happen. So and that's how we see cities and communities all over the United States creating these robust trail systems. Positive amenity to population ratios, but do mask an uneven distribution. So your amenities, what you have in the town, are pretty good for your population, but access to those amenities is another question. You know, so someone's, oh, you got enough playgrounds, oh, you got enough basketball, or you got enough pickleball. It wouldn't be a Parks and Rec conversation in any community if someone didn't say pickleball. Say everywhere we go, it's pickleball. So those are kind of 2 different things. Distribution levels and service gaps, we talked about that already. You know, there's a balanced approach to recreation and conservation, I believe. I think, you know, that seems to be the case in Wellington, but limited activation. So what are you doing to activate more outdoor opportunities, more trail exploratory things, those types of things? And finally, walking equity, we believe requires immediate attention. That doesn't mean all hands on deck, you're going to solve all the corridors, but what we mean by that is that there's opportunities happening right now, developments happening, as things happening, at least say, wait a second, should that matter for connectivity and mobility? We think it should. Sure. Just a couple more slides on this one, I promise, and I'll ask, oh, actually, there we are. Look at that. So you heard a lot, and there is hundreds of pages behind what I just brought to you. And you're going to have, or have already, depending on the case, access to those. But I'm just curious, is there anything new that maybe you didn't have an opportunity to talk about in the last breakout session that you wanted to make sure that I log with any observations or feedback or questions? Anything stand out?
Yeah, comment. So we spend a lot of time talking about what's available for our youth. I have 3 very active boys. We're very, very active and take advantage of, you know, what's available in Wellington, but we do go outside of Wellington to satisfy some of those needs. What we haven't really spent a lot of time talking about, which I think the latest slides show, is that other 70%. So we talked about 30% being under 18, there's 70% of our population that is older, aging, and still wants access to either programming or the connectivity in the trails. They want to be out walking their dogs. They want to use the facilities. And I think there's an opportunity here, and it's showing that they want pickleball, but there's more than just pickleball. So I don't want to lose that. We talked a lot about the youth side, and that's really important. But there's also the rest of our population that needs to be addressed and feel that their needs aren't being met in Wellington as well.
I'm really glad Jesse brought this up because I had brought this up in a few PROST meetings that I think our involvement with the senior center could be better. I think that our involvement with their programming and providing more opportunities for the elderly population in town is something that the town should be invested in, and it should be something that we're looking at in the future. And I know my mom goes to senior center. I know a lot of the seniors that are there, and they do have outings and they have things, but there's not always the organization to it and the research. You know, they go somewhere and they find out it's closed for the season, and then they don't get a chance to actually have that involvement with that outing. But I have brought it up before, and I would kind of like to think about maybe bringing that into our fold at some point where we're more engaged.
That's the trends for Colorado or the country in general. Wellington's way behind the curve. We're still young family dominant, way more compared to Larimer County or Colorado, but it will eventually hit us too. So everyone is only just getting older. So and less babies. So we got to plan for everything that we do to be multi-generational, to be friendly for everyone. I think that's huge. And so that connectivity of the facilities to people is even more important than, because it's almost like you double your amenities if you double access to the amenities you already have. So I mean, that's the problem that we're seeing with those corridors, right? So
I think when we talk about a lot of this stuff too, obviously in order to provide the broader public access to a lot of these things, right, you're going to have to provide that infrastructure in existing town property, right, our existing parks and that sort of thing. But just thinking out the box here, I wonder if there's an opportunity also for, I remember there was, and obviously this would be something that would be up to the HOA, but potentially there's an opportunity here for the town to partner with certain HOAs that have certain amenities that other HOAs, or maybe you're within proximity to an HOA that has an amenity, but we obviously, you couldn't have a whole bunch of pools all around town, right? So I'm thinking of Harvest Village, for instance, came before the board number of, probably about 2 years ago, where they basically said, hey, we don't have enough money for our pump house, and we'd like to be able to work with the town to see if we could provide see if we could help them with that. Unfortunately, we could not do that because we can't offer individual HOAs that type of assistance. But what if there's an opportunity there to have said HOA maybe provide a certain amount of pool tax or something like that could go back and help them pay for their HOA fees, while also providing folks that maybe don't live in that HOA that might live nearby access to an amenity that might be there. Just an idea.
So one of the things that I found effective when I was working in Lake Zurich, Illinois, they had a parks master plan, and in that parks master plan, all of national park studies and so forth, recommendations, but they had a very specific set of ordinances that governed how development would, and their impact fees for parks specifically was to fill amenities within the master plan, which is a great idea. And on larger developments, instead of them maybe building a pocket park, maybe it's time for conversation about what does that impact fee look like, and tying that to the master plan, where a major subdivision could build it for. So I mean, that's the type of leverage you know, that Lake Zurich used when I was there.
I think you're probably, obviously, as you're aware, the discussion with Sage Farms and the potential of doing a metro district for future Sage Farms, if they were to provide some of those things, that there might be an opportunity there.
Yeah, I'm not talking about specific developments, I'm just talking about
Yep.
in general, the generalized approach from,
Yeah.
from a town organization perspective. Because yes, we've got two developments that are still on the books, that haven't even touched the ground yet, and some that are still under construction. Right. I foresee us to continue to grow, and that was just one way of addressing things like, we need a pool, you know, maybe a portion of that says, instead of doing this, you know, either dedicate land or you do something for that, for a rec center or a pool. So,
You mentioned Lake Zurich. I was Buffalo Grove for 5 years.
all right.
I was there with them a long time ago. But that example you just provided, many cities do the exact same thing. And it's always a careful balance. You're not necessarily, or maybe you are, you know, dictating a certain way as development occurs. It's more about, are your core priorities identified clearly? So there's no question from maybe the development community or some say, what does really Wellington really need? Well, here's what it is. Here's our executive summary of what wellness, you know, looks like in Wellington. Can you work with us in this, or do you mandate things like neighborhoods connected to the regional trail system? So those trails are being handled, or parks that are developed that are, you know, is it policy to say that they must not have fences around, open to the general community, you know, type of thing. You see stuff like that, and that's not necessarily. I'm not saying you do all those things, but it is one way to say, with limited government funding, how can you still get all those priorities that the community wants? And it's by partnerships like you're describing. So excellent. That conversation you guys are having now is happening every planning effort that I'm doing right now across the country, and our team. And there's a lot of it. What else? Anything else stand out from the services? Any surprise? I saw a lot of heads nodding yes when we showed the gap areas and things. Anything else? Yeah.
I mean, I can believe the gap, you know. John, you mentioned trail between the north and south, or down on west side of the highway. Town's been working on that for 12 years. Still. Yep. And yes, that big red circle right there in the middle of that map there. You know, I think one of the last ones they tried to work on was, you know, Box Elder Creek and underneath the railroad trestles and all the easements and so forth, but it just got nowhere. So, yeah, I like this slide because showing the gaps illustrates very clearly, you know, where focus could be placed.
I do want to note when we're talking about the parks and their park condition there, good or poor. I mean, this also isn't a surprise. These are kind of the things that PROST looks at all the time. They monitor their parks, so they know the state of it. Viewpoint's been on the target list for a long time of just incredibly declining. It needs maintenance and new playground equipment and among new surfacing, all kinds of things. So highlighting it, not here just from a park condition of amenity count versus size. I'm sure that more goes into the park condition overall, but the point is building all these new facilities is one thing. PROST is a huge advocate of making sure what we have is in usable condition and is servicing the community as well. So I want to bring that up because we may have a bunch of acreage of parks, but all the equipment there is old, approaching safety concerns, all these other concerns there that are like just as important as building new facilities or new amenities is making sure that what we have is good. So Centennial Park is my favorite park just sentimentally, but it really offers so little amenities and doesn't make any sense how it's designed. Viewpoint's like our biggest, right? Outside of the big community parks. And it's the only place where we have full-size fields for soccer and football and those kind of things. So it's just, there's a lot more to consider when you're considering amenities at each one. And whether or not that amenity is only available at one park too. So like full-size fields, only available at one park. And that should be dispersed throughout the community. Because just to say we have it is one thing, but to say it's only here and not anywhere else in the town is also a disservice, I think, too.
And viewpoints not, I mean, if you looked at the accessibility even to viewpoint, like the lack of parking. And you have those neighborhoods right on the other side of the railroad tracks and they can't even get to viewpoint. So I mean, it's kind of like its own little pocket too. And that in of itself is a concern. I mean, when we talk about walking equity requires immediate attention, I mean, I laughed when I saw it on the slide, but it's not funny.
Right.
I mean, it's such a huge issue for us. I mean, we want to be in a community where people can easily access the space that's available to them and you can't do it. So you know, that's a huge concern and we know it is. So it's refreshing to see it again. But again, it all ties to that connectedness. And this came, I was thinking about this earlier and it kind of popped in and popped out. I attended a webinar put on by, I don't know whether she was the CEO, but I don't know how many of you are familiar with Headspace, the app that focuses on mental health. They have meditations, they actually have therapy and a whole bunch of other things. I'm lucky enough to have it free through work. And so they hosted a webinar and the gal talked about connectedness specifically and how connecting with other humans plays such an important role in our mental health. And when we can do that easily and we have places that we can easily access, you know, and we spend that time together, it makes us that much better as people. And what is that going to do for our community when we have that opportunity to really be with each other face to face and spend that time together and learn from one another?
It'd be habitual and convenient to do it. Like you don't have to work hard to make
Right.
So,
Yep.
Great conversation, team. Oh, I have go ahead.
Just what hits home to me, you know, obviously working in the system and seeing everything. We have all these numbers and everything. If you look at, you know, certain NRPA standards, National Parks and Recreation Association standards, we do actually hit per capita how many tennis courts we should have, actually do hit how many pickleball courts we should have. And I'm just saying those specifically because we're right about there, maybe a little bit less on tennis. Basketball courts, we're just about there. Maybe one would get us there, but it's all the equitable distribution, the quality of what we have now, and the usability. We have multiple pickleball courts, right? We know that, but they're on the tennis courts, and the tennis courts have pickleball courts on them, so they can't be used for tennis tournaments. So like sheer numbers, if you look at it, it's there, and it dials directly into system performance is okay, but there's limited excellence. Like a pickleball court with a tennis court, that's not excellent. It's there, but it's not excellent. And then with limited activation, viewpoint is there, but how do you activate viewpoint for anybody but that 20 to 30% of the population that's there on a day-to-day basis, and then get people there safely and out of there safely to play football? It's just, it's there, but it's not excellent and it's very limited.
This is outstanding conversation because that can so easily be overlooked in the details to say, oh, you meet your standards, you're good. And it's like, wait a second, do people actually use it? Is it safe? And those types of things. So excellent conversation. I have one more section on the analysis, which Bill, I just happened to notice something though. How come that monitor shows the clarity of the zones and this one doesn't? We'll move on.
No pressure.
So, okay, that was the deal. So, yeah. Excellent. So, there. We do want to talk about, and there's a typo here, it really should state community center. That's on Berry Down. We meant to say that. And we just work with some different facilities. Sometimes we can miss something. So community center, but we were tasked of taking an additional step through the feasibility component of the planning effort to take a look at a what if scenario for a community center. And so what we've done so far, and also associated with best practices, first of all, could that even exist? I mean, like literally, do you have a footprint for a typical community center? We had to look at that, and you do. And it's probably no surprise, but some cities don't. unless something else happens, like a rezoning or something. So you have that opportunity there. But then what we do is we say, okay, we have all this data. We know what generally the priorities seem to be from the community, from the analysis. Not that any of it is done yet, but we feed that into our architect team, which is BRS. BRS are, we partner quite a bit with them, and they help us with right sizing facilities around what are, priorities and opportunities. And that's how far that we've gone with this from a location and general kind of standpoint of where potentially might be situated, how it might take advantage of trail systems, some accessibility, size. Also important here, because we don't know who's going to necessarily provide this, if it's even going to happen, but growth opportunities, what do we focus on first? Are there other, is a library go there's, which I'm just naming things that happen in other communities, fire station, museum, I have no idea. Do you go out and do cultural art things? I don't know, but also is your opportunity to focus on a main area, meaning the core findings that we had from the planning, and say, time out, we need to be flexible. Who's going to pay for this? How are we going to get partners here? That sort of thing. So that's what you're seeing on this slide. And to be clear, this is not finite or complete. This is a scenario where it says, could this happen in Wellington? Could this happen here? And so don't get too caught up in the square footage of the spaces. However, I will say that the overall center that we conceptualize is about 60,000 square feet. How that square footage is broken up, it's really too early to tell, but we do challenge the experts here that build these facilities all over the place. Yes, we need the best. We need sport courts. We need fitness. We need a pool. We don't know necessarily how big, but about based on population growth considerations, service priorities, could that fit? What would it look like? And I know it's really hard to read on the screen. I'm sorry, but we're just trying to illustrate here that it's possible that a location wise, that square footage wise of how that might look, and that's the upstairs, by the way, of a facility could be laid out, and square also zones showing potential expansion or phases. Maybe the first phase is a pool. Maybe the first phase is a gymnasium. I don't know, but it provides that flexibility. So again, we just wanted to make sure from a community center standpoint, where do we go with that? Well, we worked with professionals to say, is it feasible? We talked to other town staff, like your police and fire, from emergency access services, those sort of things. Not going too far, but we wouldn't want to come to you tonight and say, yeah, it's possible. And then some of the basic stuff. Did you even look at engineering? Did you even talk to the other departments? And we did, and they were awesome, by the way. So we've just done enough to kind of conceptualize, could this happen? And we did it. One, we were tasked by the scope, but two, I mean, probably no surprise, but many times over and over again throughout planning, you heard spaces, how are we going to do that? So that's why we did that. So next steps of this could be looking at cost, looking at, if that's the direction, to looking at things like partnerships, developing pro forma, meaning cost of operations, those sort of things. But guys, we're far from that. Here tonight, just saying, we did this work at this level to conceptualize what a community center could be, who provides it, where it specifically goes. We have no idea. I mean, but it is possible. So again, just want to hit that kind of a high level. And we knew that was an important area for the community and for you. So I again put one more, and this is not to say you can, I'd love to hear anything you have to say, but this was one of the final areas in the presentation where I wanted to pause and see if you had anything else to say or questions about a community center. And we do have, not that they need to, but we have the architect team here. We've got a little bit more, just getting a lot more expertise than I do when it comes to facility design. But any questions or input or ideas or clarifications on the community center component that we looked at?
I just want to point out that both the need for a community center and the location were identified in the 2008 master plan and in the 2015 master plan. So this is now the third in however many years, right? The community has advocated for this, and that location has been identified.
I think it's the most centralized location. I mean, if we talk about, if we can fix some of our connectivity issues that we've talked about, I mean, we already have trails that run there. It's along one of our main streets. If you talk about kind of, well, we can take our kids and they can play at the park, we can hop down to the grocery store and grocery shop. I mean, any of those pieces, And again, we're hearing from people. I love that the scope was changed from just a rec center to a community center. I think even just the basic language in that speaks so much more to it being a community gathering space. I love the idea of connecting the library. I mean, they have done an incredible job with the space they have in the library we provide, but there's so many more opportunities for classrooms or, you know, those experiences. And so when I look at having a hub and a central place for our community, and we've heard that that's a desire, it's kind of neat to see it fleshed out a little bit, even if it is just visionary. I think that sometimes that excitement is important for us to have. I think sometimes it's easy to get bogged down in, well, how do we afford this? And what does this look like? Well, let's just share some excitement about the fact that there is a place for something like this for our community, and that we're hearing people say this is what we want.
I think also looking at what we had as wish list and what you see in some of the earlier slides of this is what the community wants, if we can piece those together and then also find the connectivity to get there. Now you've got, you know, my brother wants to go swimming, but I want to play basketball. And we've got a multi-use area that everybody can be, they could find something to do. And so we don't just go out and maybe put these little projects up all over the place, and we just kind of concentrate our efforts to finding a place that we can do a lot of these activities at once and get the community into one area and provide multiple services instead of, like I said, placing them all around the community. We at least have somewhere in some way to get to something like this.
Do you want to know a cool thing about rec centers or community centers? People don't usually sleep there. So trains in the middle of the night don't usually bother from that sense. Yeah. I do want to know that, because that's come up. So, I mean, if people are sleeping there, that's a different question. But I was hoping to get more insight on the scale of it, because when we talk about rec centers, it scares people because they're thinking this massive, crazy, huge thing. And this is a big deal. But if you were to look at neighboring communities or recreation districts, their facilities are excessively massive. I'm just thinking Eaton in my head right now, which triple the court space, 4 softball diamonds outside the back, an extra pool area being built, a whole wing of community rooms, kitchens, and event venue. So those things are huge, and I agree that I think this seems more scalable and makes more sense for Wellington. But can you explain like the size and then like just the scalability of the community and like why it might look like this? Because to me, this is such a more realistic potential possibility versus looking at this massive projects.
Yeah. Billy, would it be okay with you if I asked BRS to
Absolutely.
answer a couple of those things? And would his voice be okay heard over here from the back?
Yeah, or I can go here too.
I can project.
Okay.
So BRS does this exact type of visioning and considerations for communities all over the United States, and so that's why they're great to have on the partnership team, you know, to best serve you. So yeah, we don't ever intend to oversize something, or we want what is right for Wellington, and we're even far before saying who even runs it or where it's built or anything like that. But please, Kevin, Mark, Mary.
No, I think a big part of this is what you just described, is right sizing it for the scale of the community. And so we've been blessed with working on a number of the communities around this area. So we were a part of the Eaton project as well as Berthoud. And so Eaton currently is about 64-ish thousand square feet, somewhere in that range, but they're adding on more gymnasium space to it today. So they had a need, and it didn't even meet all of that need. They're expanding it. It was also designed to expand more on aquatics as well. That has not happened yet, but there's a lot of demand there. There are a significant amount of outdoor fields and other things with that facility. So it's a centralized facility where you have more distributed fields and those sort of things throughout your community. So not all of that would have to go into this spot. Berthoud is another example. Berthoud is about 50,000 square feet. And so Berthoud is a great scale for a center. This center would be slightly larger. One of the things that we know from Berthoud is that they have one really fantastic party event, meeting, gathering space within it.
Hmm.
If they could do it again, they would add another one of those spaces. And so that's where, like in the example that's shown here, when we're talking about it being a community center and wanting to focus on gathering, making sure that we have enough classroom space in areas where people can connect, or it can expand as well. So it can serve 30 people, it could serve 80 people. We want to make it so that's really flexible. So that's part of the idea here as well. So as we think about scaling from that perspective, that's what we think is appropriate. And this is just using also best practices that we see in the area. As Jason said, we do a lot of projects like this with Barry Dunn all across the country. And so that's where we have a great understanding of what different community sizes usually is appropriate for those. And so like number of basketball courts, starting with 1 high school size court, 2 middle school size courts, but then being allowed to expand it if you all need. And just making sure we plan for it, budget for it. Same thing with off of like a community wing. And not to say this is the solution, but it's like these kind of approaches that we want to provide. So being able to expand a community wing so that if you have other uses, like let's say a library wants to come here, you could do that, or more gathering spaces, or it's outdoor gathering. Just a lot of flexibility.
Okay.
That's what we want to provide.
So this is comparable to Eaton then?
It's comparable to the base version of Eaton, but not as it expands.
Okay, maybe that's what I'm thinking, because they're like, this is that future outdoor pool area, or,
Yeah.
okay, so.
I mean, the big difference is Eaton has more courts to this day.
Yeah.
This one would have more aquatics, and
Ah.
this one would already have the lap pool built in at day one. But part of that is addressing needs for this area. And that's coming from feedback from the community, but also from Billy and his team and his staff, and what they're hearing from the community, as well as what the 61,000 touch points provide.
Are there any other highlights of like what you built here that you wanted to mention specific to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think other highlights would be specific to really providing access to fitness. One of the things is there's a perception out there that if we provide fitness within a community center, that it could have a negative impact on the fitness community that's on the private side within Wellington. Actually, there's a pilot study that a professor from North Texas University has done that's looked across the country at multiple communities, and it's found the inverse of that. That really it's kind of like with all tides, both ways. So as that rises, you get more fitness. And so you might have a yoga instructor that starts a small class here, and then people want to go into something more advanced, or they want to go and start their own facility. That's great. Let them go start their own facility. And then you can start with another yoga instructor and start making an incubator in fitness. So that's the other part of this, as you're all talking about that. And then on that economic draw side, it's really, this will bring people to the community, and people from neighboring communities will come to Wellington, but also it'll keep your folks here and just enhance the quality of life.
2 things on my part real quick, just of what's been said right now. The trains, I live 6 houses from the tracks. I don't hear them anymore. I grew up right near an airport and right next to a busy freeway. We could always build a sound wall, but that gets into way more detail than what we're talking about feasibility. I have also had the conversation about the fitness part of it, whether that's going to drive down gyms or not. There's a different community that's going to go to a gym, and a different community that's going to go to a rec center. And so, like you were saying, that might boil into more people going to, privately owned fitness centers, because they're going to go and get started and they're going to see how that works. And then you're going to have kids in there, and you're going to have people that aren't so serious. So they're going to want more focus based, and that's going to drive them to what we have already. So just my 2 pieces on what I heard right there.
Just to add on about this, a place like this, in terms of it being multi-generational, this will have the fitness that also caters to the 18 and under and the senior crowd, when private fitness does not cater to those demographics at all. So it is offering more of the fitness accessibility to a larger demographic than private would.
The other thing that I think of when we talk about either a rec center or community center is, and I don't, this opens a whole can of worms, but for somebody who has young kids and there's not a childcare opportunity available, if a community center has either a school or a daycare or programming that say your kid can go in and take swim lessons for an hour, and guess what? You can hop in and get a quick workout at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's reaching multiple people at one time, and it's providing something that we don't have in our community. None of our private gyms have a childcare option. And there are a lot of parents who would love to be able to go and work out and can't because they have to go to a gym in Fort Collins that has childcare available, or, or they don't work out. So, that's a whole nother opportunity that we're creating for our community.
I think one important factor that hasn't been talked about, and we do want to support for the whole community, but we haven't talked about our lack of ability to support our needs for adaptive recreation, because we don't have any sort of a facility to help with that. And we do try to encourage and provide anything necessary in our current programming. That's one of our goals in our department. But to actually bridge that gap and give the proper care that people in our community they must go to Fort Collins or neighboring communities for, just to get the proper care, and the people that are specialized in that, to give them an opportunity here, something we haven't talked about yet. And I feel like at some point it is going to be our duty to support that population to be able to stay here, because a lot of the time, what I've heard in the conversations that I have from people that are struggling with that in our community is not just the lack of the facility and the team. It's literally just to get to Fort Collins to be able to do that. And a lot of times it's quite pricey to be able to be in those programs as much as they need that support. It's not just a swimming lesson here and there. It's like sometimes every single day they need that. And then also the ability for the multi-generational. I know we've touched on that, but as our population starts to age, as we talk, they eventually will, just the physical aspect of that and the physical therapy side can, we don't have the infrastructure to support any type of programming that really brings the community together. So just from a programming standpoint, two huge areas besides the teams, which I know we all know that, but those are two areas that I see that we have almost little to no support for.
Touching on that when it comes to adaptive or higher needs for our youth, they're children who are either in a wheelchair or maybe need some specialized support are already pulled away enough from their community and their people and their peers. And so if we can offer that sort of opportunity in our community, then we've stopped isolating them from yet one more thing. And so they're with their peers that they go to school with, or they have the opportunity to see people that they already know. So when we talk about what that looks like and feels like for those families, that's a huge deal.
And I want to make a fun point. I don't know if anybody knows that the senior center in Fort Collins used to be the senior center, and then it turned into the adult activity center or whatever. I can't remember the exact name, because they found that integrating the teens that didn't have much to do in that part of town with the seniors that were going there was actually beneficial to both of them, to a standpoint where both groups wanted them to be integrated. So it's like it doesn't just bring a portion of the community together, it brings everybody together, and that actually improves the quality of life from youth to aging adults. And it's plenty of studies that show if you do multi-generational, it helps throughout life, not just at your specific point that you're at in life.
And Billy, that's happening all over the United States. I mean, the days of having dedicated senior center, call the senior center, most of those organizations are flipping the other way, saying the community center. Where I was at for a while, Westminster did the same thing, the Southern, the Adult Activity Center. That's just another, but it's all over the country. And it's because, senior centers, in some cases, people don't want to assimilate with the term senior population, so they go to the multi-gen. And that's what we saw all over the country. And then you see a whole diverse set of activities for all ages, but also your management of just operations. The times of use are just different. And so it's interesting how that works. And then the other factor, I mean, you're going potentially considering one of your first community centers in the area. How can you try to balance as many needs as possible without undersizing and making appropriate spaces for the things you want to do? So the idea that folks were talking before about as many spaces as possible being multi-use, yeah, everyone's doing that. just to make, the idea that this must be this. Maybe there's a reason for that, but I would challenge and say, is there? Because everyone else is kind of saying you want to be able to use this space after 3 for this, or before 8 for that, and you want to be able to flip that over.
Well, you can see that, I don't remember whether it was at Aslan Community Center or is that? Northside,
Northside.
yeah. I remember going in one day just to use the upstairs track. And they had basketball, but then they were also using the basketball for their CrossFit classes, so it's the same kind of idea. Like if someone's not using that court at that time, you can use it for something else. Creates that ability too.
Yeah. Northside, my favorite memories are there, the tot days where they pull out all the
mats,
silly things for little kids to run around, and you just let all the toddlers loose in one of the gym bays.
It was amazing.
Oh, I mean, I've saved my life so many times.
And then you're spending time with other moms and
Yeah.
or dads who you may not see otherwise, and it gets them out of the house because raising toddlers is isolating.
And I've had some pretty significant conversations with the senior center too about what would they want from a rec center or community center before, and they pretty much were like, we just want our own senior center, right? So the goal though with a facility like this is it gets us out of their space here of all the stuff that has to turn over and be redone all the time. So they wouldn't have Zumba classes in their senior center. They wouldn't have community meetings in their senior center. They would have the room that they could set up for their haircutting room and just do haircuts, right? And then they could have puzzles out that stay out. They don't have to be cleaned up because the room has to turn into a completely different facility overnight. Those are the kind of things that they're asking. They're like, we just want our own space. So in my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, you want a whole new senior center. But actually, I think what they want is to be able to do all the activities that they would do and participate in, and everybody else would do and participate in, all that somewhere else, so that they can reserve the space really for their lunches and other
The senior center
gatherings.
function.
Yeah, the function of the senior center. So I think I'm excited to talk to them. I'm going to talk to a few more people from the senior center about this in particular, but I think that really accomplishes a lot of it too, because a couple of them do other activities and things, but I think their goal is to have their own space, which kind of what this would maintain.
Even our clients that specialize in only providing active living communities, and we have some of those, 30 years ago, now they were developing dedicated spaces for everything. Everything was compartmentalized. I can tell you they're coming to us to say, how can you help us no longer do that? Because we're trying, to put a square peg in a round hole with having this class follow this, not even realizing Billy's team takes 4 hours to flip that over now. Right. There's not enough space in there. So, again, I'm just giving some examples. I think the key here is to say, a lot of steps to go, but what's right for Wellington and what is possible? Because you may, there'll be things here that are, potentially come, to the surface that maybe through partnerships or something that maybe some of your top tier items are not satisfied for the community, this potential exploration. So then what do? Do you pivot and work with other providers? What do you do? So there's a lot of choices. And, but tonight's purpose was to say, we want to give you a little more information on what we're, where we're at so far and looking at a community center and being responsive. I think that's another way to say it, because the community said it time and time and time again, let's give them an idea of what this could potentially be. So there's many more steps on that, but anything else input for, I think at this point, whether it's a community center or anything, as we get to, I actually have 3 or more slides. Why don't I just do that? Oh, go ahead.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, please.
With this space, I love that there's also that additional space, that plot of land kind of next to it with the view for future growth, because I feel like in the past, Wellington has focused so much on how do we fix what's an issue now, with a lack of foresight, a lack of understanding of what's going to happen. We know our community is growing. We know it's going to continue to grow. That is not going to stop. So while this may meet what our needs are now, I love that there is this other spot that allows us to potentially grow into that. I think that that's something that's really important. I feel like you guys have done a really nice job of that. When you talk about what do we do for the downtown, what it's really about visioning what's happened, what's coming down the road instead of this constant reactive. And I think that our community will really appreciate that foresight and the proactive piece. So while, you know, I know that Eaton probably, you said they have like some of their bigger courts and outdoor like softball fields and things.
Yeah.
I think that I'd like to see some of that for tournaments and things be in a separate location. I think there's a need for that and there's a desire to have those locations in Wellington where we can host tournaments and events and that sort of thing. I think for me, I look at this space and I think this is for our community. This is here, this is in the heart of who we are and what we do, close to our neighborhoods, if we can fix some of our connectivity issues. So for me, it's that space where our community can thrive and grow. And in 5 years, they can say, hey, well, this is something we don't have here that we really feel like is a need. And that gives us the space to grow into that. We're not kind of stuck in just one space.
And BRS and Barry Dunn have done a great job of listening, because after we got the data, a lot of what we saw out of this is how can we be adaptable and how can we look for the future? So all these little, you know, this could be an extension on a gym, or this could be an extension patio, or a whole nother area for X, Y. It's all out there to say, we're not making the decisions, but we want to be adaptable inside and outside with the grounds. Is it a library that goes in that turf area? I don't know. Is it a senior center? Is it a medical park? Who knows what it could be? But there is area to grow on that community space. I mean, what's in there now basically meets the needs of the programs that all the statistics has said, like, this is what communities or the community feels is lacking. But it can be so much more if it needs to be more in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Appreciate that. And just as well, we're happy to hear that, hey, Barry Dunn and BRS, you didn't get it even close. That didn't represent our community. So we're love to hear that too. So
Go back.
Yeah, go back a couple slides. Come on.
But I just want to be yeah. I do want to be clear that there is additional steps remaining, that this is certainly not, this is an important meeting and discussion on visioning tonight. We still have the additional steps with the project team to formalize things like strategic initiatives, meaning what really the core areas of focus for the town, park and recreation, open space, trails should be, and then formulate the specifics around goals and actions. Some of them were even give an example tonight, like, okay, what does that really mean for like infrastructure for events, for example? You know, one of the hallmarks of our planning effort, I believe, is that we also then, and jumping even past that, is implementation. We work with the staff team to set up 18-month goals. Okay, what are the first things you want to prioritize? So there's more steps, but this is a really good checkpoint. Also showcasing in a formal setting what we've learned so far, and how that, builds in, but also hearing all your input has been absolutely fantastic. But I at least wanted to be clear that there is additional steps. So, again, those speech bubbles that are there are sort of some of the key things that we've heard and areas that we're going to be focusing on in our next steps. So I'm guessing the community that's listening, maybe here this evening, you may have, even after this meeting, you may even have more questions. Guys, we want that. So the window is still open for giving feedback. And I would just ask to funnel that through Billy as the project manager and main contact. And he'll definitely we meet regularly and often to make sure we're going the right direction. So please submit your questions and follow up to Billy with any particular needs.
Can I just say one final thing for anybody that may be listening as far as that goes? I just want to say, I think you guys have done an amazing job with this vision. I mean, we're talking about a 10 to 15-year plan for this Parks and master plan. When we do all of these things in conjunction with each other, and a special thanks to Barry Dunn for doing this for us. When we do the feasibility study along with the master plan, that is literally planning for the future. Then we're not having to piecemeal this stuff and do an extra study for this thing down the road, right? Getting this all done together is just absolutely fantastic. And I think you guys have done a great job. And big thanks to PROST and Billy for getting all this together, and staff as far as that goes. So you guys are all awesome. So
it's neat to see how it all connects. I think when you talk about what is the master plan for the town and what are things that you see as needs, and we can look at from the PROST standpoint and see what the needs are. And you can talk about a transportation plan. We're seeing all these different touch points that feed one big picture, and it's all the little pieces that kind of snap into place. And I think when we can acknowledge that they all fit together and that they all build this purpose of a place where our community can really spend time and love where they live, then we're doing what they've asked. And when we can all work together, it makes a big difference. So.
I want to thank the Barry Dunn and your partners and everything for all the great work you've done, staff and everybody that's been on board with this from the beginning. And really want to thank the trustees, because I know we came to you guys a bit ago, about a year and a half, whatever it was. And we came pushing this master plan, and you guys accepted it, and you came back to us with an approval. And now we're finally seeing this set down. And I want to appreciate the community that's been involved with all these engagements, and anybody here or listening. It's been really a great process to go through. And lastly, I want to appreciate you guys as Pro Sport for dedicating your time to this and being there for me and helping me get through this too. And I think we got the ball rolling. I think we're going to have a backbone. I guess is the way I try to explain it, is we have a backbone. We got something that down the line we can keep going back to this when we have money to spend, and we got projects we want to do. We want to get people involved. And like was said before, partnerships and how to reach out to people. I think this is a really important piece for Wellington and its parks and rec. So I really appreciate everybody in this room and everybody who's been involved.
I was so excited. It's love. I can't wait to see the final product, because it's really gonna help us serve our community better. So
It's been a super cool experience to be a part of. I think I've been on the PROST board now just a little over a year. And I came in super excited, and being able to be a part of this process has been really cool. And I'm grateful to be able to do this for our community. I mean, we all live here. We love it. Just because you love someplace doesn't mean you don't see the opportunity for growth.
Right.
But I think it's also been a good reminder to me of all the things that have been done in the past. Just because we have more work to do doesn't mean we shouldn't celebrate what's been accomplished. And I think sometimes we get lost in the push forward, and we don't take the time to really be grateful for what's changed. So this was wonderful. It's neat to be able to sit down all together and talk. And I think visioning and being excited about things is important, that we don't let the other little pieces get in the way of us looking at what the possibilities are.
I think what I like most about this is that, the Board of Trustees and PROST realized that there was need for a master to understand exactly what the need. But the fact that this study went directly to get their input, it's not the board saying, "Oh, we need to build a basketball court here." We're just guessing at that point. If we don't know what the community wants and what the community says that they would like to see and what they feel like the town needs, then we're not doing our job. So yes, this is a great piece of work that everyone, and I think everyone who's been working on this. And we need, as a Board of Trustees, we need to be focused on, accepting this plan, accepting this, that the community has spoken. We shouldn't be in there trying to change things up or so forth. Let's accept that this is the plan, the community's voice of that. And let's now go to work on how to make it happen. Because that's going to be an important step. How do we make these things happen? So, and that's going to take a lot of work. But it always starts with a plan. If you don't have a plan, then you're doing work for nothing. So thank you so much for giving in all your time and energy, and thank you, Jason, and your associates there for the work you've done on this. Talking about Buffalo Grove.
Yeah. Been a while, but yeah, good memories.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. I don't want to repeat all the thanks, but it's going around. So everybody in this room is important, and what you do and the heart you have, and it matters, right? I've said it before, but planning to fail or failing to plan is planning to fail, right? And so that's what we're not doing here. here, right? We are planning ahead. We're setting the vision, making sure that we're getting things happening for the community, right? It may not be tomorrow, but we're gonna get it done and we're moving for the people here in town. So thank you, everybody. And that's a wrap.
Speak.
Thank you. Cool.
Thank you.
Yes, you.